Amberjack Early Careers Expert Series. My name is Su Hadley, and I am the Head of Attraction at Amberjack. Amberjack, as many of you will already know, because I say this every week, is a leading provider of RPO services to the early careers sector with expertise across attraction, assessment, candidate management, technology, and learning and development. And today I'm going to be joined by Nathan Southard, our Senior Campaign Marketing Executive in our attraction team. And we're going to be focusing on targeting the right universities for effective early careers attraction. It's designed to be a short session over lunch, so we do have some time a little bit later on for Q&A. If you have any questions as we go, do put them in the chat, and if we can answer them all in this session, that's great. If we can't, we will include them in our 6 at 6 follow-up later on, which you will all receive a copy of. So welcome to everybody who's just joined, and just a reminder, we are recording the session so that we can do that follow-up with you a little bit later. So I'm going to get started. When we build our attraction campaign strategies at Amberjack for each of our clients, that is recruiting graduates or interns, and they're interested in engaging students on campus, we begin by building a university matrix. The University Matrix is custom for each client, but uses data points that are readily available from HESA if they're in the UK. So HESA is the Higher Education Statistics Agency. If we're looking at global universities, we research via the web for as many similar data points as we can identify. I don't have too many slides today, but I am just going to share one or two to talk through these points. So from HESA, as a matter of course, what we pull is student gender by university, along with disability, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. And where we can, and where it is relevant, we also look to pull gender, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status by discipline. We might do this to have a particular focus on, for example, gender for all STEM subjects for a client. We also do take a look at international versus national students by university, and we might do this if a client has restrictions around their right to work, so that we're eliminating focusing on any universities that have higher proportions of international students. So the data is combined with other information from sources like the Complete University Guide, so we consider rankings, category of university if there might be a particular focus to include or predominantly exclude a certain amount of Russell Group universities. And we also have a look at those universities where the Times Top 100 survey takes place if brand building is a particular goal. Lastly, we combine this with as much data as we can obtain for prior campaign results. So we're looking at offers made from each university or how many students reach certain assessment stages, etc. We then put all that data into a matrix and we begin scoring universities on their results. So we're trying to focus our energies on universities that will deliver the best results for each client. So the scoring is weighted to give priority to key goals. So if gender balance is the most important factor, we might weight that more heavily than, say, university ranking, or we might discount particular data points if they're of little relevance overall. So this is an example of a university matrix. What we then do is we take those weighted scores, and that helps us prioritise efforts by being able to tier universities. And when we tier universities, it will determine how we might carry out certain activities in, say, tier 1 universities. So that might be attending events, but in a lesser engagement stage at a tier 3 university, we might simply be placing job adverts. This basically means that we can focus our energies on around a third of the 165 universities in the UK and work on building key relationships with relevant university career services. It's important to note no universities are ever excluded from our list, but we might rely on other job boards to reach the wider university group. So alongside this, each year we build a fairly comprehensive list of upcoming events with each university in our master list. This means that we can swiftly react to recommendations for attending events for clients, prioritising relevant events for capacity and booking onto events as soon as the university matrix is reviewed and agreed with the client. It's all quite manual research, and it generally relies quite heavily on our ongoing relationships with the universities across the UK and other regions as they're sort of required. So that's the base level of what we tend to start with when we're looking at targeting universities. I'm going to hand over to Nathan, who's going to introduce himself and walk you through how we work with those universities most effectively. Over to you, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. And hi everyone. So my name is Nathan Southard. I work with Sue and the attraction team here at Amberjack, and I'm going to be talking today about the university events and building strong relationships with those universities. So I'm aware that there's quite a short time limit on the call, so I'll probably just be racing through and dumping a load of information on you. But if you do have any questions, just pop them here in the chat and we can answer them at the end of the session. So, getting started, whilst there are lots of different methods that universities offer to get your employer brand and roles in front of students, what we often find time and time again is that the best way to really develop a meaningful connection with those students and eventually turn them into actual applicants is through meeting them face to face. And that's not just us saying that as employers, that's coming from students as well. So in Bright Network's latest student survey, which was released just last month, 66% of future graduates said that they prefer to meet an employer in person rather than at a virtual event. So they're really keen to actually get to meet people rather than just sort of speaking to them on a Teams call or a virtual careers fair or something like that. So with that in mind, and now that you've got the university matrix to decide which universities that you want to be targeting for your events, the question moves to which event format is best for you. And now that's completely going to depend on who you are as an employer, what your goals are, and also what the universities that you're targeting offer. If you're a smaller employer, you might want to increase mass awareness of your company. So you could go to a careers fair to increase your mass awareness of your employer brand at that university. Or if you're already a massive employer, everyone knows you. So your JP Morgans, your EYs, that type of thing. You might want to focus on a specific area. So you might want to look at increasing diversity so you can connect with relevant societies at your target universities to host a more intimate presentation or a workshop or something like that. It's also worth noting that different universities do offer different event formats. So what might be offered at one might be completely different to what's offered at another one. One example of this, which we always like to say, is Imperial College. So they offer a recruiter in residence event, which, well, on this event, students can book out 15-minute sessions. And what they'll do is have one-on-one chats with employers and representatives from an employer. It's a format which works really well because students actually get to ask whatever questions they want to the employer and also put a face to the name as well, which really helps students sometimes. It's a format which not all universities offer, but it's something which we always get really good feedback from both the employers that have attended and also the students who have attended as well. And it's also worth noting that not every university calls every event format the same thing. So what a university might call a parade stand, one might call it an employer in the foyer. That's like another event format which we see is quite popular, where you have a stand up in an area of high footfall. But that's also the event format where the name changes the most depending on what university you're at. So just having that good awareness of what each university at your target universities calls the events is really useful. But the moral of the story overall is that the type of event that you should attend is kind of determined by who you are, what your goals are, yeah, everything like that. Another thing to bear in mind is that you also want to make sure that you're getting the best return on investment out of these events, which usually means obtaining candidates' information so that you can contact them after an event or getting them to register in advance of an event for contacting. So we actually have a product designed just for this. We call it our candidate event booking portal, which we use to register candidates ahead of an event, but also to communicate with them once an event is finished. And that doesn't necessarily just mean in the week after, that could be for the rest of the recruitment campaign and also can be used to build a really good keep warm strategy as well with students who you've already engaged with. This works best, we found, for self-hosted events, so your events like workshops or presentations, but at the same time, it can be a really useful tool for collecting candidate information during your larger events like a careers fair where you're going to be speaking to lots and lots of students. Ultimately, though, the key to success is do as much research as possible into the different events hosted by your target universities. But also, if you're just starting out with in-person events, just go to as many different types of events and see which ones are right for you. So how do you find out about what events are offered at a university? Now, there's a few different ways that you can do this, but the main ones are through either looking at the university's career services website, depending on how good they are at updating their events, or you can contact them directly. With any luck, though, if you've already got a good relationship with a university, you'll already have a contact in their careers service. One of the benefits of building relationships with these universities is firstly that they tend to be more responsive to you and open to new ideas if they already know who you are. But also, you're more likely to be the first to hear about their events when they do release them, and also new event formats as well. And you might even get recommendations specific to your own company if they like you enough. So how do you build those relationships? Well, like any good relationship, the key is consistency and reliability. At any university, the career service's ultimate aim is to get their students into meaningful employment. And so if you can offer the students that, then you're already off to a really good start. The key is to talk to the careers service, ideally on a call if it's a key target university, with the aim of getting to know them and what they offer, who your key contacts are, but also to let them get to know you as well. So what programs do you offer? What can you offer students that potentially other organizations can't? And also, we're not saying it's possible or even helpful to build a relationship with every single university in the country. Like Sue mentioned, there's hundreds of them. So you want to narrow down your focus. And once you've decided which are your main targets, you can focus your efforts in engaging and building a relationship with those key universities, which are going to lead to the best results for you. You're on mute, Sue.
That was good. I said thank you. Sorry, you missed that bit. No, thank you very much for it. You're going to walk us through now a little bit of an example of how we deployed this approach for a client to align their regional recruiting and their regional campus managers. We are talking on a global scale for these guys, but how we worked on building out the university matrix with further research.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share how we used all of the discovery, the research, and the analysis that we have at our disposal to help ST Microelectronics evolve their approach to campus recruitment. So I'll start off with a little bit of background on this project because it was quite a significant project. So we were contacted by ST Microelectronics, who are a company who design and they build semiconductors and microelectronics and lots of fancy little electrical components that I don't really understand, to take a look at their current campus strategy for student recruitment and then implement what we later came to call a global campus strategy. So they recruit around about 1,000 students each year into graduate level roles, but not graduate schemes, as well as internships and apprenticeships. And these are in different regions across the world. So they operate primarily in about 12 different regions. It's a really interesting landscape in the industry that they're in because, as I'm sure you're aware, it's an industry which is massively growing at the moment, especially with the rise of AI. Like some of their competitors, like Nvidia, becoming some of the most valuable companies in the world. But at the same time, there are fewer and fewer students who are learning the skills that are needed. They're more analog-based skills. And this is something which ST were looking to address as well. So there were two key challenges that we found when we audited their current campus strategy. The first of which is that they had lots of what they were calling regional campus managers who were managing campus recruitment in each region, but they were kind of all out being let loose and doing their own thing. So there wasn't a particularly cohesive strategy that they were all following. It made it really difficult for ST's central HR to get a view of what was going on, firstly, but also what was working, what each region was doing well that could be shared amongst other regions, but also where there was room for improvement. The other big challenge was that there didn't seem to be a massive understanding of what universities they were targeting and putting their efforts into, or why some universities might be being chosen. So a lot of their university partnerships we found were based on legacy relationships, often built by people who weren't even working at ST anymore. And so when we asked the campus managers why they were targeting one university over another, they really struggled to explain why they were focusing their efforts there. So in terms of the strategy that we took, as part of the work, we carried out an extensive audit of the current situation, just to make sure that we had the full picture on where we could make improvements that would actually have real tangible benefits. Once we completed this, our first step was to look at the strategy overall. So what we did is we produced a new global campus strategy, which included lots of different things, included defining the roles and responsibilities of those campus managers. We implemented global metrics and KPIs so that all of the campus managers were singing from the same hymn sheet, and they all had like a defined global approach. We introduced new university partnership classifications, and we also outlined the key ways in which campus managers should approach campus recruitment. So in creating the strategy, we worked really closely with the campus managers to make sure that whilst we were building a global strategy and we were bringing together what was previously quite a fragmented approach to campus recruitment, each region would still be able to adapt the strategy locally to make sure that it was appropriate for each region. And that brings us on to the university matrix, which ties it all together quite nicely. The other thing was a very comprehensive set of university matrices. So usually when we build a university matrix for a client, we take around 10 data points that Sue's already discussed into consideration. So it's your things like rankings, the type of university, previous hiring, demographic information, and we use all of that to build the scoring matrix. With ST, though, they had a very different type of student that they were looking to hire. And so whilst diversity was still important to them, and we factored this into the scoring, their industry in microelectronics and semiconductors is super specific. And so it wasn't just good enough that we were targeting students or universities with a high number of women in STEM, for example. So through the discussions that we had with ST and the campus managers, we collected a list of 14 super specific disciplines and subject areas, which were really important to ST. So this included things like photonics and optoelectronics, systems engineering, nanotechnology, cybersecurity, and a whole load of other things, which I'd never heard of until we started doing this research. Once we had this, we looked at these 14 disciplines and we added them to our matrix. So each university was being scored on things like this. We were taking an in-depth look at each individual curricula at each university, which is a very time-consuming process, but we wanted to make sure that we were understanding which universities offered and were specialists in each of those 14 areas which were important to ST. They also had the option to weight these disciplines differently in their scoring as well. So in some regions, there might have been less of an emphasis on the manufacturing and more emphasis on cybersecurity or data science. So where that was the case, we take the disciplines like cybersecurity and cryptography that we were looking at, and we weighted those more highly than some of the others which were less relevant for each region. Overall, we ended up creating about a dozen different matrices for countries across the globe, and then worked with the campus managers in each of those regions to make sure that we fine-tuned them and they were happy with the outcomes. And from there, we ended up creating 3 new tiers of partnerships for ST to have with these universities to help them really focus their efforts. So the top tier I'll outline what the tiers were. So we had the top tier strategic partners. They were the most important, the very small number of universities who it was really important for ST to have a really strong, close relationship with. One step down, we had strategic partners who were universities who were really important to ST, but less important than your top tiers. But ST should still maintain a good relationship with and, attend events, activate their brand there. And the next step down, we had sourcing partners. So those were those universities who might have fewer relevant disciplines, but they're still worth engaging through lower effort means like job board posting, making use of lower level employee branding activities. And so whilst these classifications were specific to ST, the nature of how we group universities into tiers is something that we usually do when creating all university matrices. So in this case, the results of all of the research, analysis, and insights that we did, there were 3 key points. Is that ST were able to take these regionalized university matrices to help manage their regional campus managers and also benchmark global KPIs. The material that we created was also uploaded into their ATS so that they could continue to evaluate performance on a global, regional, and university basis and make adjustments to suit. So they can take data from previous years and include that into future matrices. And the final one is that the material also forms a baseline for a new Campus Manager Global Toolkit. So we rolled this out to guide the campus managers on how to best engage with the universities in their region and how they can make the most out of student engagement opportunities, especially when there is a limit to available talent in a certain area. I'm aware that that was, yeah. Anything else?
No,
Quite a
not from
detailed
me.
insight. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to go into.
We'll give you a minute to catch your breath. But if anybody does have any questions for Nathan, please do put them in the chat. I can see that we've already got a couple of great ones, but thank you very much, Nathan. Firstly, I'm going to go to Catherine's question. It's good to see you, Catherine. Nice to have you join us. Are there any platforms that enable you to push adverts out to multiple universities at one time? And I'm really guessing, Catherine, that you're hoping for the true silver bullet in my answer, but I'm not sure.
I don't think there is one, is there? I just was hoping.
Well, I will probably defer to somebody on our team a little bit in terms of the detail, but there are so the university job boards are based on obviously what they acquire in terms of technology. So there are a couple of key players in that market. So Target Connect will be one of them, Job Teaser, Handshake. So Handshake we love because you can post in one simple go and you can just tick the universities you want to add it to. So that's predominantly US based, but it is encroaching on the UK market a little bit more and more. So we welcome that arrival because that'll be a delight. One log on, one job advert, several clicks and you're away. Nathan, I don't know if you can share a little bit more insight around perhaps around Job Teaser.
Yeah, so it is a little bit regionalized. Each country and area does, well, usually have something very similar to this. So Australia, they use Career Hub. A lot of Europe uses Job Teaser, and actually they did recently just change how they work as well. So Job Teaser is no longer allowing free adverts, but the benefit of that is that they have produced a platform where you can click what universities you want. Or you can just push it out to every university in their network. That primarily covers it's most of France and Spain, but there are also some other countries, some universities in other countries as well.
We're in the UK.
Yeah,
in the UK. So
they
we
have
tend
a couple
to take the approach.
of university relationships in the UK, but I think if they're introducing paid for job adverts, they probably won't see growth in the way that they probably originally intended. That's very much a European thing. So but sorry, carry on, Nathan.
So we tend to, like Target Connect, like Sue mentioned, does have the functionality, but it is very expensive functionality. So we tend to take the approach of, like you mentioned in your comment, it's the creating separate accounts for each university, which is a time-consuming process. You are right.
Yes, we absolutely feel your pain, Catherine. You know, if we're running a dozen or so client campaigns, and if they've got more than one job advert, that's a lot of university posting. You know, if you've got a client with 7 schemes across 30 universities, unfortunately, and very bravely, the guys in our team are posting a lot of job adverts at the start of the season. So we pray for more handshake connections. We are hoping that this is not a sales pitch, but our new candidate management platform that is in development and due to be launched this year, we are hoping that on the roadmap an API integration will allow us to do that from the platform directly into some of the university job boards. So again, I keep my fingers crossed that that will be a development that will save hundreds and hundreds of job postings that we have to do each season. But thank you. I know it's a painful question, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
No worries. And Freya asked an interesting question about balancing the needs and wants when it comes to university targeting. So if the business needs more diverse candidates, but that is in conflict with something like higher ranked ones, how do you decide which ones to target? So we use the university matrix really as a good evidence tool so that we can take that back to client stakeholders so that they can say, when they come along and say we want the top 5 universities, you can actually evidence what those universities are going to bring you. They're never excluded, as I say, because we'll do other media job advertising that will bring students in from those top universities. But the key focus and priority is to get better conversion at universities that are driving probably something. It's usually diversity, some better targeting of your candidates. So we use the university matrix to show the workings, if you like, show how the sausage is made in terms of getting there, and enabling each of our stakeholders to go back to their stakeholders and explain why we're going down the route that we are. Again, you can do the weighting and the scoring so that things aren't discounted, but they are perhaps of lesser importance. But at the end of the day, you do rely on the client to make determination as to what is the most important factor for you as well. I see an interesting question from Farah. Well, it's not a question, more of a statement, I think, in help of Catherine. But Farah, I don't know if you would like to explain a little bit more about how you use a generic job advert.
Yeah, that's fine. So we're a professional services firm, and we've got multiple departments that we recruit into. So what we've historically done is basically lumped in pretty much all of the information around our vacancies into one job ad, because we are quite a small team, and it is fairly time consuming, as obviously we've discussed, and basically you just want to push them to your website anyway. So as long as there's a call to action to go into your listings, then hopefully they'll have a little nosy around and find what they're looking for ultimately.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great idea actually for some of these roles which have very similar requirements and skill sets. So in some cases you have very specific needs, etc. But it's also about your journey, as you say. If you're driving them to the website where there's more information and it's easily searchable so they can find what they're looking for. So some people do have a challenge with websites in that respect. They can obviously take themselves on that journey because they do crave in-depth information about roles and real insights. So, but that could be a big time saver. I don't know if that would work for you, Catherine.
Sorry, coming off mute. Yeah, no, it could do. Yeah, it was just, I think we need to start all over again, to be fair, with the whole which universities should we be targeting. So we need to start from scratch again, I think, which is why my next question's just
So we do it, we review it every year, because also what we find is we take that prior campaign data for each of our clients and we find that there might be adjustments, plus there needs some change somewhat, but we take all of that into account and we build them a new university matrix. So you might find 80% remain in the tiers that we gave them the previous year, but new stuff will do. We put new data in every year, so it does require going back and creating that master version, and then we chop it and change it. But the scoring is very, very custom for each client based on where they're evolving basically in terms of their campaign. So yes, it's a big job every year, but once it's done, happy days, we can move more quickly.
My summer project.
Absolutely. So I think we're dead on time. So thank you everyone for joining us. I hope that that's been interesting. I've put a link to the blog in the chat that accompanies this. There is a session running next week on using data, which we're doing with Morrison. So please, if you're interested in that, do join us. And other than that, we will send to 6 at 6 later with updates. Thank you again to Nathan. And I hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.